Good day, fellow adventurer, and welcome. My name is CO Matt, and today I will be covering the most voted for class for my third Pathfinder 2nd Edition class overview, the Wizard. The Wizard was one of the top dogs back in Pathfinder 1st Edition, and for good reason. They were a prepared caster with full spell progression. Their spell list was fantastic and varied, and allowed them to effectively cover all the bases they needed to. Blasting, battlefield control, buffing, debuffing, you name it. The Wizard had it in spades. Their two primary class features, Arcane School and Arcane Bond, were there to further augment the Wizard's powers. The former gave the Wizard an extra spell slot per level per day, and a bunch of other powers to complement the selected school. The latter gave the Wizard the ability to cast one spell that he had not prepared that day, and in addition to that, could upgrade his Arcane Bond as if he had the necessary crafting feats. However, the Wizard was not without its weaknesses, and it certainly had its fair share. It had the lowest hit die out of the cast of classes in Pathfinder 1st Edition, and based on your Constitution score, one could easily have a max hit point total in the single digits. The Wizard was one of the classes most prone to min-maxing, as it was important to not only have a high spell DC, but as many spells per day as possible. To sum up, the Wizard as a glass cannon in combat would be putting it very nicely. The Wizard had very high offensive potential that was matched by few, if any. However, their inability to wear armor almost forced them to prepare mage armor, just so they wouldn't fall to a couple of stray arrows. At later levels, the Wizard would shed the glass from its reputation, with incredibly powerful defensive spells such as Mirror Image, Displacement, Greater Invisibility, and other similar spells. The Wizard, on the whole, was a very powerful class, and going into Pathfinder 2nd Edition, changes would be necessary to ensure that their strength does not go unrivaled. So what is a Wizard, and how does one fit into a party of adventurers? Wizards are depicted as smart and oftentimes wise. They are usually portrayed as older, needing or wanting more time to amass all the knowledge in the world. They are usually more of the reserved type, and oftentimes find themselves in a library rather than in a tavern. Many might find the Wizard to be helpful, resourceful, and inventive, though just as many may find them boorish and arrogant. Many Wizards do not have a strong connection to the gods, and though it is possible that Wizards may reject the gods altogether, some may find solace in the churches of Nethys, the one that best understands the potency and power that magic provides. The arcane arts are quite powerful, and though some may use them for the betterment of society, others may use them to wreak havoc on said society. As such, the Wizard may be of any alignment. The Wizard's role in a party is to put their knowledge to good use, and be able to assist in encounters in any way they can. Oftentimes, it involves identifying what they're up against and taking the best course of action to end encounters swiftly. As with any class overview, let's begin by taking a look at the Wizard's initial proficiencies. Naturally, their key ability score is Intelligence. This is what will set their spell DC and spell attack rolls. Looking at the rest of the Wizard's features, everything seems kind of middling. For instance, with respect to hit points, they are still at the bottom of the barrel, at a measly 6 per level. This means that the Wizard will want to stay as far away from combat as possible, either assisting with buffs before the fight, or strong spells during it. Perception is only at trained, and without any natural inclination to invest heavily into wisdom. This means that the Wizards might be a bit sluggish to react to a battle. Their saving throws are on par with the rest of the casters, expert in will, but only trained in fortitude and reflex. The Wizard gains training in Arcana, but clocks in at the lowest number of skills trained at first level, only 2. Thankfully, their high intelligence scores can get that number much higher. The Wizard gains the fewest number of weapon proficiencies available to them. They aren't even trained in all simple weapons. They're trained in unarmored defense, but still lack training with any sort of armor. However, this can be remedied by taking general feats. Finally, they are trained in arcane spell attacks, as well as arcane spell difficulty checks. At a glance, it seems as if the Wizard has the worst proficiencies out of the bunch. However, they more than make up for it with their access to a wide variety of spells, which are augmented by their class features. I will not be going into the Wizard's spellcasting into too much detail, and will say that they are prepared casters that can prepare any spell in their spellbook. They may also freely heighten any spell known to a level they desire. At first level, they select 10 cantrips known, as well as 5 first level spells known. Whenever they level up, they may add 2 more spells to their book at any level they can cast. Additional spells can also be learned through the Arcana skill during periods of downtime. The first class feature to discuss is their Arcane Bond, an item in which the Wizard places some of their excess magical power. This usually manifests itself as a wand, ring, or staff, but can also be a weapon or other item. Once per day, a Wizard can drain their bonded item as a free action at the beginning of their turn. This allows the Wizard to cast a spell that was already prepared and cast that day without using a spell slot. This is a great way to get extra mileage out of a powerful spell in the case that the adventuring day is long and many encounters await. Next on the list is another returning class feature, the Wizard's Arcane School. Most Wizards will select one of the 8 arcane schools of magic to assign most of their focus to, giving them an extra spell slot of each level they can cast. This extra spell slot must be used to prepare a spell of their designated school. Extra spells per day are always welcome, and this puts the wizard firmly ahead of the bard and druid in terms of total numbers of spells cast per day, and on par with the sorcerer. Unfortunately, the cleric will always be ahead thanks to Divine Font. Additionally, the wizard's arcane school comes with another blessing, a focus pool, and a unique focus spell. This focus spell grants an additional power that fits the schools chosen. Thankfully, wizards no longer need to select opposition schools. However, not all wizards are keen in specializing in one area, as they recognize that all schools of magic have potential. These wizards are referred to as universalists, and they do not get to enjoy the benefits of any arcane school. Instead, they gain an additional class feat at first level, and can choose a first level spell of their choice to add to their spellbook. Some feats, such as Hand of the Apprentice, are only available to universalist wizards, and the universalist also gains the benefit of using their arcane bond for each level of spells they have access to, instead of just once per day. This keeps them on pace, if only slightly behind specialist wizards, and gives them more flexibility on the whole. The wizard's third and final class feature obtained at first level is a newcomer, the Arcane Thesis. Every wizard has some topic that they are interested in that further develops their understanding of how spellcasting came to be and how they can best interact or exploit it for their own betterment. I will be exploring the Arcane Theses further later on in the video, but I will say that each thesis comes with a strong benefit that will improve upon the wizard's casting capabilities or overall utility. At later levels, the wizard does not see many more standout class features. The only one worth mentioning is their capstone ability, Archwizard Spellcraft. This class feature allows the wizard to unlock the potential of 10th level spells, which all have incredibly strong reality warping effects. The next thing to look at is how the wizard's proficiencies grow as they level up. Once again, these numbers are quite underwhelming. Never gaining any sort of legendary proficiency in a saving throw, and never even getting to master in perception hurts. Skill feats are standard fare, and the wizard doesn't rely enough on weapons or armor for their proficiency increases to matter. What they do have going for them is their class DC increases. They will eventually hit legendary in this regard, and this also applies to their spell attack rolls. When using spells, the wizard will stay on pace with most of the martial characters in terms of how accurate their strikes are, and will actually exceed them at the end of their adventuring career, with the exception being the fighter, of course. At first glance, it certainly seems like the wizard does not gain much in terms of skill proficiencies, but this is to offset their massive intelligence score they are bound to have at first level. The wizard is a knowledgeable being, and as such, should expand their talents beyond the scope of just the arcane. As such, training in the skills concerning other magical traditions will be important, such that the wizard can easily identify what kinds of effects are taking place. Society is another useful skill to have, as it allows the wizard to recall information on humanoid cultures, traditions, and history. It also allows for the creation of forgeries, which may or may not be important based on the setting. Other skills worth investment in are crafting and medicine. Crafting scales off of intelligence, which is the wizard's key ability score. The two go hand in hand, and the wizard can spend their downtime creating new goods for their teammates to use. Later on, with the assistance of skill feats, can also expand into items with alchemical and even magical properties. Medicine once again makes its way onto the list, and being able to treat wounds in the middle of combat can be the difference between life and death, especially since the wizard has no innate healing abilities. Finally, I need to mention acrobatics here, for one reason only, the escape action. I give the benefit to acrobatics over athletics, as it is usually more imperative for a wizard to focus on dexterity over strength. If a wizard is grappled, they must attempt a DC 5 check whenever they use a manipulate action, including the somatic and material components of a spell, or the spell will be lost. This means that there is a 20% chance that they will lose the spell should they choose to remain grappled. As such, being able to escape the grapple first is important, such that they can freely cast spells, though they still should worry about provoking reactions. The exciting new class feature that the wizard gains access to in Pathfinder 2nd Edition is the Arcane Thesis. In the core rulebook, this manifests itself as one of 4 possible theses, each of which providing unique and powerful effects. To begin, improved familiar attunement gives the wizard the familiar class feat, which can be very handy for scouting and other purposes. In addition to gaining this feat, the thesis also gives the familiar an extra ability at 1st, 6th, 12th, and 18th level. This is a strong boon that gives the familiar a lot of utility, and also opens it up to extra movement and vision types, and at later levels, extra spells thanks to spell battery. The familiar also improves the wizard's action economy, allowing them to spend 1 action to command the familiar to take 2 actions, often to stride to a target and then deliver a spell, thanks to the spell delivery ability. Next on the list of theses is metamagical experimentation. This is an interesting thesis, as it improves upon the wizard's ability to utilize metamagic feats. If they select this thesis, they automatically gain a first level metamagic feat, being Reach Spell or Widen Spell. Once they reach 4th level, they can learn an additional meta magic feat whenever they make their daily preparations, so long as that feat is no longer than 1/2 their class level. This gives the wizard a lot of additional options to further augment their abilities, though there are only 7 total meta magic feats of 10th level or less, and 2 of these being at 10th level, meaning that the wizard must be at 20th level for them to select these. Spell blending is certainly another fascinating thesis to look at, as it trades away the wizard's lower level spell slots for higher ones. Spell blending allows the wizard to sacrifice 2 spell slots of the same level in order to gain an extra spell slot of up to 2 levels higher. If the adventuring day is short and not many spells will need to be used in order to get through the encounters, then it will probably be the best to use all of your powerful spells immediately before the battle is dragged out for too long. Last, but certainly not least, is spell substitution. The wizard's downfall during encounters is that they might not have prepared the correct spell for the job. Equipping a fireball versus enemies resistant to or immune to fire damage would be a waste of a spell slot normally, but now the wizard no longer has this problem. With 10 minutes of uninterrupted effort, the wizard can empty one of their currently prepared spell slots and replace it with another one of the same level. With a wide array of strong spells and heightened versions of lower level spells, the wizard will surely be able to find a fitting replacement for the situation at hand. Even if they are interrupted during this time, the original spell slot is still kept, and this replacement may still be attempted at a later point in time. It should first be noted that caster classes in Pathfinder 2nd Edition do not gain the luxury of a first level class feat. That being said, 2 of the Arcane Theses a wizard can select from come equipped with a class feat, and of course, any human or half-human that selects the Natural Ambition Ancestry feat will be able to select a first level class feat. First on the list is Counterspell, a reaction ability that allows the wizard to potentially counteract the effects of a spell being cast. In order to do so, one must roll a counteract check and expend a spell slot that has the same spell prepared as the one being countered, adding your proficiency bonus and spellcasting modifier to the roll versus the caster's DC. On a critical success, the target is counteracted if the spell is no greater than 3 levels above the spell slot used. On a success, the spell is counteracted if it's no greater than 1 level. On a failure, it's counteracted if the spell is below the level of the spell slot used, and will never counteract on a critical failure. I mentioned these different levels because of the heightening feature. Eschew Materials removes the need for a wizard to purchase a spell component pouch, or in case it goes missing or is stolen or broken, but they will still need to provide any costly components, such as when casting Alarm. This feat is, in a word, garbage. It replaces the material component with another somatic component and doesn't really have any other effect. I'm not actually completely sure what the benefits of this ability is outside of very, very specific scenarios, but you should skip it. No, seriously, this feat is so bad I cannot express properly into words how bad it is. On the other hand, the Familiar is a great feat to pick up, and improved Familiar attunement is an even greater thesis. The Familiar provides so much utility, whether it be scouting with flying and dark vision, or even providing an extra spell slot at later levels. If you have an extra feat to spare, I would heavily consider taking this. The possibilities are endless, and would fit right in with the wizard's repertoire of abilities. Hand of the Apprentice is only available to Universalist wizards, and this allows them to fling their weapon at an enemy using their intelligence modifier instead of strength or dexterity for both attack and damage rolls. This is a focus spell, and also gives the Universalist a focus pool with 1 point. Because this has the manipulate action, I believe that it can only be used with one-handed weapons, as casting a spell would otherwise require a free hand. Reach spell can be a great way to help out your teammates while simultaneously staying out of harm's reach. Adding 30 feet to the range of a touch spell can be great at assisting teammates engaged in melee combat, while extending the range of a short-range spell can also be great at not being within range of a single stride. Widen spell can also provide the wizard extra bang for their buck, and possibly catching more enemies in an area of effect spell. Spells like Color Spray and Fireball would greatly appreciate a meta magic feat like this one. Additional class feats gained at 2nd level and the even levels thereafter are certainly nice, but none are really too exciting until 8th level. At 8th level, you are offered a choice between potentially 2 amazing class feats, Advanced School Spell and Bond Conservation. If you chose an Arcane School, some of the powers listed here can be quite useful, as you are given an extra focus spell and point in your focus pool. Not all spells are created equally, however, and it should be noted that some schools' abilities, such as Abjuration, are stronger than others, like Transmutation, based on what the wizard does best. However, that should not stop you from choosing the ability if you think it matches your character's development. The other notable class feat here is Bond Conservation. When you use your Drain Bonded Item ability, you may use this one-action ability prior to casting a spell. If you do this, you may then use Drain Bonded Item again next turn to cast a spell 2 or more levels lower than the first spell cast with Drain Bonded Item. This can give the wizard an ungodly amount of extra spells per day, and is a must-have during an encounter if you're expecting long adventuring days coming up. Spell selection is critical for a wizard. Though you are often offered quite a few spells, and can certainly learn more as you progress throughout your career, you will never have access to your full spellcasting list. There is no feasible way that I can review every individual spell, as each spell will have different scenarios where they will have more or less use than others. What I will say, however, is that cantrip selection is especially important. They have unlimited uses, and as such, should be used as liberally as possible. When making daily preparations, Detect Magic and Read Aura are almost must-haves. Shield is another solid cantrip, as it improves the wizard's lackluster armor class and can also be used to reduce damage from an oncoming blow. It also blocks magic missiles. Higher level spell slots should be used to complement what the wizard wishes to do in combat. For an evoker, Magic Missile can provide a great amount of damage for a single spell slot, as the 3-action Magic Missile guarantees approximately 11.5 points of force damage done to targets. And just by the way, no enemy has innate resistance to force damage. Buffers might want to include Magic Weapon, while debuffers will certainly gain great mileage out of Fear, Color Spray, and Grease. Keep the bonus spell slot courtesy of Arcane School in mind, and always be sure to learn a spell of your favorite school when you gain access to a new level of spellcasting. Additionally, feel free to heighten your spells as you please. Finally, if given downtime, use as much of it as possible to research new spells and add into your book. The most difficult part of this analysis is reviewing how the wizard stacks up versus the other casters in terms of how well they do their jobs. The wizard competes with exactly one class when it comes to being a librarian, the Bard. A Bard with the Enigma Muse gains access to Bardic Lore, a catch-all skill that lets them recall knowledge on any subject. This gives the Bard a great use of potential knowledge without having to invest in the normally requisite skill, Arcana, Nature, Religion, and Society. However, this can only be increased to Expert with legendary proficiency in Occultism, and will never go higher than that. So, thanks to the wizard's incredibly high intelligence stat, we'll probably still eclipse the Bard in this regard. The two classes will have approximately the same number of skills trained at first level, so that ends up being a wash. Utility is another role that the wizard can fulfill, and competes heavily with the Alchemist. The Alchemist knows quite a bit of alchemical formulae, and will only expand their repertoire with time. The wizard can pick up feats such as alchemical crafting to stay on pace, but will never even come close to how many goods the Alchemist can output in a single day. The Alchemist's strong emphasis on the crafting skill gives them a leg up, and the wizard will be placed in a respectable position in this regard. The wizard might compete with the rogue for this position, though usually there will be little to no overlap. The rogue's additional skill feats will definitely give them an advantage, but thanks to the wizard's spellcasting, will even the score. The arcane and primal spellcasting lists are the ones most concerned with blasting and battlefield control. With regards to this position, the wizard will be having to face serious competition with both the druid and the sorcerer. Let's start with the druid. The druid's Storm Order gives them a focus spell to deal significant amounts of damage in Tempest Surge, which does immense amounts of damage, scales incredibly well, and can debuff enemies on a failed save. Compared to the Evocation Wizard's Force Bolt, the druid easily comes out on top. Both casters also have access to strong damaging spells, such as Fireball and Lightning Bolt. However, the difference here is that the druid also has an advantage in being able to access their entire list. They don't need to keep a spellbook. If the wizard uses all of their spells to blast, that is a lot of lost utility as a result. The wizard does have one redeeming quality, however, in their arcane school. This gives them one extra spell per level per day over the druid. This could potentially tip the scales back in their favor, but on the whole, the druid's expanded versatility gives them the edge. In addition to that, the druid casts off the best mental stat, Wisdom, meaning that they will have a higher perception and likewise initiative modifier. This means that the druid will act first more often, and with respect to battlefield control, going first makes all the difference. Between the wizard and either the primal or arcane sorcerer, the difference in power lies within how often the wizard will be able to add more spells into their spellbook. As it stands, the two classes actually learn the same amount of spells at every level greater than first by just class features alone. They will also almost have the same amount of spells per day, except that the wizard will have one more thanks to Drain Arcane Bond. I argue that intelligence is a stronger casting stat than charisma, as intelligence directly affects number of skills trained and also number of languages known, though this is a much lesser point. Intelligence currently affects 5 skills, Arcana, Crafting, Lore, Occultism, and Society, while Charisma only affects 3, Deception, Diplomacy, and Intimidation. One could argue either way which skills are more important, since the Charisma-based skills are oftentimes dependent on the GM. I must say that the Elemental Sorcerer, however, comes with a much stronger focus spell that also scales well, not as well as the Druids, but much better than Force Bolt. The Wizard's power lies in their utility and breadth of spells, but if we are comparing how well each one can blast, I give a very slight edge to the Sorcerer, in the case that the Wizard is unable to have enough downtime to learn new spells. However, In the case that the wizard is able to add more spells into their book, then the scales tip back in the favor of the wizard, as they will be able to have more options to deal with different kinds of foes with varying weaknesses and resistances. Now, one must compare the wizard to the other traditions with respect to buffing and debuffing. In my opinion, the bard is the best buffer in the game, thanks to their improved action economy and composition cantrips. Inspire Courage is so good now that it would be almost foolish to not use it any given round. On top of that, the occult spell list has many strong buffs and debuffs that the bard almost certainly has an edge in every area except spells per day. The bard will also be on par with the wizard in terms of skills trained, assuming they have 12 intelligence, and actually eclipses an 18 intelligence wizard with any more investment. The bard's Inspire abilities are also powerful that it would be incorrect to suggest that the wizard is a more capable buffer. The wizard, however, will have more spells known than the bard, even with downtime, and will also have more spells per day. On the whole, I would say that the wizard can keep pace with the bard, but falls short thanks to composition cantrips and more relevant class features and feats. Next up in the comparison chart is the cleric. Courtesy of Divine Font, the cleric has the most spells per day at their disposal. Harm and Heal might not be the best spells to have at a moment's notice, but a well-placed 3-action heal can turn the tides of a battle, even if it means allowing multiple teammates to recover from death's door. Additionally, out-of-combat healing without expending consumable resources like potions or wand charges means that the cleric has quite a bit of use and flexibility. Now, on to how well they buff and debuff. Some of the cleric's focus spells, such as Charming Touch, can be a massive hindrance to enemies and can possibly swing battles with a single failed save. However, the wizard's Charming Words can output similar effects, and as such is on par. In terms of buffing, one must consider what buffs are more important, mobility or combat abilities. The wizard gains access to more relevant buffing spells such as Fly, Invisibility, and Haste, and still retains others that the cleric will receive, such as Freedom of Movement. I would say that on the whole, that the wizard's spells are better than the cleric's, but once again, the wizard casts out the weaker stat. If I was forced to choose, I would give my edge to the wizard, but it is very close. The first build presented here is my personal favorite, a character that I've spent years modeling and perfecting into something special. I was going to play this character in an Age of Ashes campaign, but sadly it fell through. Arthur is a human abjurer hailing from Elidir, but was forced to relocate after a magical fire decimated half the city. He would have recurring night terrors of set fire, and one time, he envisioned Breachill in his dreams. He had to travel there to stop whatever harm might arise. It is fitting that he is an abjurer, as his goal is to prevent magic from being abused or falling into the wrong hands. As such, he has taken Counterspell and Recognize Spell as bonus feats, and his spell list has quite a few abjuration spells on it. Quite possibly the antithesis to the last build is Pyrrha. She focuses on the raw power that the arcane arts can provide, and as such, is an evoker. She knows it is important to have different damage types ready for different foes, and as such, knows a spell of each type of energy: acid, cold, electricity, and fire. She also prepares Magic Missile in her extra slot in order to ensure damage on foes that might be trickier to hit. The final build I'd like to display is a Sleuth, one who uses divination magic to uncover secrets others might not find with the naked eye. Detect magic and read aura are quite important to figure out what kind of magic is abound, and gives him insight on what may have happened at the scene of a crime. Sadly, there is only one divination spell available at first level, but thankfully, it is True Strike. At later levels, when divination spells become more available, he will trade in his lower level spell slots for higher ones to make the most out of his abilities, thanks to spell blending. On the whole, it might certainly seem that the wizard is a weaker class, especially with reference to how they performed in first edition. However, with careful preparation, the wizard can certainly shine in an adventuring party. With a reasonable amount of downtime to learn more spells, the wizard will outclass the sorcerer in most areas, except ones that explicitly call for charisma. The wizard retains its versatility, though in a much smaller and less noticeable way moving through editions. That being said, with poor proficiencies that do not scale well, it can be very easy to see why one would not want to play a wizard. The wizard stacks up pretty well against its competition, probably being the second best to do any sort of spell-related activity, which is just where it wants to be in terms of what role to play. It'll never be as good as a buffer as the bard, nor will they ever be as great of a blaster as the druid, but the wizard will certainly be better than the former at blasting, and better than the latter at buffing. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for additional content. I plan on releasing one video of this type every week until I've covered every class, so do stay tuned. I currently do not have plans on doing these videos in any sort of order, but I will be posting the next class poll on my Discord channel and on Twitter, which can both be found in the description. And of course, have a great day.